We've called up someone we go to often on financial matters to have an understanding of what the state of affairs is, Joe Jackson. Incidentally, he had tweeted about this thing just 3 days ago or so, where he talks about the situation with our finances and our reserves. So we've called him up to have a conversation. He's with Dayless Finance. Joe, you're welcome to Eyewitness News.
Thank you, Mark. Good to speak to you, and good evening to all your listeners.
Good evening. I'm looking at the graph you tweeted. You said Ghana may face foreign exchange shortages if we fail to lock in the IMF bailout. Ghana's gross international reserves dropped from $9.8 billion in January 2022 to $5.9 billion in February 2023. This is only 2.8 months of imports. The minimum should be 3 months imports. Please explain this to us. What's the problem?
Okay, it's very simple. We should have dollars so that we can buy our imports, the most critical being fuel, drugs, the food, and all the other things that we buy. That means that when you take our money that is available for our importers and our banking system through the central bank, we expect to have reserves of up to 3 months, so that if something went wrong, we'll still be able to go along for 3 months and still be able to import the most essential things. Now, these reserves, according to the central bank, had fallen below 3% as far back as February, which is the latest data we had. And so when I tweeted about this last week, Friday, I was just bringing to the attention of the public that the situation is getting dark. At that time, we didn't have the latest figures from the IMF, which is now projecting that we'll have less than 3 weeks, less than 3 weeks of import cover by the end of this year.
What does that mean practically?
Practically, it's just like this. It's as if you're a child and your father said to you that if anything happens to me, if I fall sick, if I'm unable to bring in fresh money, after 3 weeks, we can't buy anything from anybody else. All we can have is what we have in this household already.
Okay. Now, when IMF says our reserves are near empty would mean that we have no import cover at all. And I'm looking at the report. I'm told we are doing better, only better than Zimbabwe and Sudan.
Yeah,
that's not a good sign.
It is not a good sign at all. It shows how severe the imminent crisis that we are facing, economic crisis. I don't even know whether I should call it imminent or yeah.
It is already here.
It is already here. It's been coming for a long time, Barry.
Okay, you made a point in your tweet. Are you suggesting that the only solution is the IMF? And I'm referring to the bailout, the program the government is seeking.
At this moment, I can't fathom what will happen if we don't do the deal. We have to come to the table. We have to do everything required to do the deal. Otherwise, we're facing massive shortages of foreign currency. We're facing doomsday because we can't import fuel. We're facing shortages of fuel, so there'll be fuel queues. We can't import drugs. Even our own vaunted jollof, the rice is imported, the chicken is imported, the tomato paste is imported. So listen, we've got to do this deal, and this is a cry to the labor front, the pension fund, and all the other stakeholders who have a role to play in making sure we get the IMF deal by the end of May. Let's sit around the table. Let's realize how bad the situation is.
So that those who
let's get the deal done.
Those who are kicking against the DDE, especially those who are saying their pensions should not be touched, your advice to them is that they should, bend backwards over?
They should. Listen, we are between a rock and an extremely hard place. As much as we should say this is not fair, this is almost like there's a proverb in Akan that says that you slap me and you stop me from crying. That's where we are.
But they argue that, listen, it's not their fault. The government is not showing commitment. Why should the government touch their pensions? And these are very old people who are hoping to be old, who've left their investments there. They say, touch not my pensions. They are justified in protecting their pensions.
But somebody has to pay. The sad thing is that because this government has consistently refused to cut the size of government, because it's still holding on to an over 60 billion deficit, which means we're going to borrow another 60 billion in this current budget year. The moral authority to tell the pensioners, please, the situation is that is not there. But it is what it is. I can speak into you and close to tears. I'm saying, let not this happen in Ghana. Let not this happen in Ghana. We've got to find a way to come together as a nation to resolve this issue. The government has to do this, show leadership by cutting its own expenditure, the size of government, the appointees, reduce the size of borrowing for this year's budget, so that it can have some authority in speaking to the pensioners, in speaking to the other stakeholders, to say, this is where we are, and this is what we have to do to stave off the disaster.
Joe, we have to again pray like we've been doing for the past few weeks since we started talking on this matter. But thank you for speaking to us.